The snowflakes fell like tiny daggers against Hannah's face as she stumbled through the white wasteland, her frozen fingers clutching the ragged shawl that had long since stopped providing any warmth. She had been walking for what felt like hours, maybe days, her mind so clouded with cold and hunger that she could no longer tell the difference between memory and reality, between the living and the dead, and somewhere in the fog of her consciousness, she knew that if she stopped moving, she would never move again. It was December of 1883, and the blizzard that had descended upon the Colorado mountains had caught Hannah Douglas completely unprepared. She had been traveling with a small wagon train heading west from Kansas, seeking a new life after losing everything in a fire that had taken her family's farm and her father's life just 3 months prior. Her mother had died years before from consumption, leaving Hannah, at 22 years old, entirely alone in the world. The wagon master had promised they would reach Salida before the worst of winter set in, but nature had other plans. The storm had struck with a fury that seemed almost personal, scattering the wagons, killing livestock, and separating the travelers in the blinding white chaos. Hannah had lost sight of the others 2 days ago, or was it 3? Time had become meaningless in this frozen hell. She had tried to follow what she thought were tracks, but the wind had erased them almost as quickly as they were made. Her horse had stumbled and broken its leg in a hidden ravine, and she had been forced to continue on foot, leaving behind what few possessions she still owned. The cold had seeped into her bones, making every step an agony, every breath a knife in her lungs. Her hope, that fragile thing she had been nursing since leaving Kansas, had finally guttered out like a candle in the wind. She fell for the 3rd time in an hour, her knees hitting the frozen ground with a crack she barely felt. This time, she did not immediately try to rise. What was the point? There was nothing ahead of her but more white, more cold, more emptiness. She had no destination, no family waiting for her, no home to return to. The world had stripped everything from her, piece by piece, until all that remained was this frozen shell, kneeling in the snow, waiting for the final mercy of sleep that would never wake. "I cannot do this any more," she whispered to the howling wind, her voice cracking. "I have nothing left. Nothing." The tears that slipped down her cheeks froze almost instantly. Hannah closed her eyes, feeling the strange warmth that came with the final stages of freezing to death. She had heard about it from an old trapper who had stayed at their farm once. He said it felt like being wrapped in a blanket, peaceful, almost pleasant. She let herself sink down further, no longer fighting. Then she heard it. Through the roar of the wind, through the fog in her mind, a sound that did not belong to the storm. A horse's whinny, low and concerned, heavy footsteps crunching through snow, a man's voice deep and urgent. "Jesus Christ, madam, madam, can you hear me?" Strong hands gripped her shoulders, turning her over. Hannah forced her eyes open and found herself staring up at a face partially obscured by a thick scarf and a wide-brimmed hat crusted with ice. What she could see were dark eyes, wide with concern and frost-covered eyebrows drawn together in worry. "Please," she managed to whisper, "just let me sleep." "Not a chance," the man said firmly. He scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and Hannah felt herself being lifted against a broad chest. "I have got you now. You are going to be all right." Hannah wanted to protest, wanted to tell him it was useless, that she was beyond saving, but her body betrayed her, and she found herself clinging to his warmth like a drowning woman clutches at driftwood. He carried her through the blinding snow, and she could hear him talking to his horse, his voice steady and calm despite the storm raging around them. "Easy now, Buck. We have got to get her to shelter. That old line shack should not be far. Just hold on, both of you." Hannah drifted in and out of consciousness as he carried her. She was vaguely aware of movement, of the world tilting and swaying, of the sound of a door being kicked open and the blessed relief of being out of the wind. Then she was being laid down on something soft, and the man was moving around her with quick efficiency, his boots thudding on wooden floorboards. "Stay with me now," he said, and she felt him pulling off her wet clothes with hands that were gentle but urgent. She should have been embarrassed, should have protested, but she was too far gone to care. He wrapped her in what felt like a dozen blankets, rough wool against her frozen skin, and then she heard the sound of flint striking steel, the crackle of kindling catching fire. Warmth. Blessed, beautiful warmth. It started small, just a hint of heat on her face, but gradually it grew stronger as the fire built. The man kept working, never stopping, and she heard him moving his horse into what must have been an attached lean-to, heard him talking softly to the animal, thanking it for getting them here safely. When he returned, he knelt beside her and lifted her head gently, pressing a tin cup to her lips. "Drink this, slowly now, just a little at a time." The water was cold, but it was wet, and her parched throat accepted it gratefully. She managed a few small sips before she had to stop, exhausted by even that small effort. The man set the cup aside and sat back, studying her face in the growing firelight. "My name is Jesse Lawson," he said quietly. "I am a ranch hand from the Triple Creek Ranch, about 15 miles south of Salida. I was checking on our winter range when the storm hit, and I took shelter here." "What is your name, Hannah?" she whispered. "Hannah Douglas." "Well, Hannah Douglas, you are one lucky woman. This lined shack is the only shelter for miles, and if I had not been here, if you had passed by in that white out." He shook his head. "But you did not. You found it. You found me. And I promise you, I will not let anything happen to you now." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a breath. "Why do you care?" Jesse was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "Because leaving someone to die in a blizzard is not something a man can do and still call himself a man. Because everyone deserves a chance to live, especially someone who has clearly been fighting as hard as you have been to survive. Because—" He paused, then continued more softly. "Because I know what it is like to feel alone in this world, and I would not wish that on anyone." Hannah felt fresh tears, hot this time, sliding down her cheeks. She had been so certain that her story was over, that there was no one left who cared whether she lived or died. And yet here was this stranger, this cowboy she had never met before, looking at her as if her life mattered, as if saving her was the most important thing in the world. "I had given up," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I had no hope left." Jesse reached out and very gently brushed a strand of wet hair from her forehead. His hand was calloused and rough, but his touch was tender. "Then I will be your hope from now on," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Until you can find your own again. And I promise you, Hannah Douglas, you will find it again. This storm will pass. They always do." Something in his voice, in the steady certainty of his words, made her believe him. For the first time in days, perhaps for the first time since the fire that had destroyed her old life, Hannah felt a tiny spark of something warm in her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of hope. Maybe that was enough for now. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the blankets seep into her frozen body. She could hear Jesse moving around the small cabin, could hear him adding more wood to the fire, arranging things to dry her wet clothes, checking on his horse. The sounds were oddly comforting, a reminder that she was not alone, that someone was looking after her. "Sleep now," Jesse said from somewhere nearby. "You are safe. I will keep watch." And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Hannah did feel safe. She let herself drift off, the sound of the storm outside becoming distant and unimportant, the warmth of the fire and the knowledge that someone cared enough to save her wrapping around her like a protective shield. When Hannah woke, the quality of light filtering through the gaps in the wooden walls told her it was morning, though the storm still raged outside with undiminished fury. She was warm, truly warm, for the first time in days. The pile of blankets Jesse had wrapped her in had done their work, and the fire crackling in the small stone fireplace continued to push back the cold. She tried to sit up and immediately felt every muscle in her body protest. "Easy there," Jesse's voice came from across the room. "You have been through hell. Your body needs time to recover." Hannah turned her head and saw him sitting on a wooden crate near the fire, a tin cup in his hands. In the better light, she could see him more clearly now. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark brown hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard, and those same dark eyes that had looked at her with such concern the night before. He was tall and broad-shouldered, built like a man who spent his days doing hard physical labor, but there was a gentleness in the way he moved that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "How long have I been asleep?" she asked, her voice still rough. "About 12 hours, give or take." "It is mid-morning now, though you would hardly know it with this storm." He stood and brought her the cup. "Here, it is not much, just some coffee, but it will help." Hannah struggled to sit up, clutching the blankets around her for modesty. She realized she was wearing a man's shirt, far too large for her and nothing else. Her cheeks flushed hot. "Your clothes were soaked through," Jesse explained, his own cheeks coloring slightly. "I had to get them off you or you would have died from the cold." "I kept my eyes closed as much as I could, and I only did what was necessary. Your things are drying by the fire now." "Thank you," Hannah said quietly, accepting the coffee. "I am not angry. You saved my life. I know you did what you had to do." She sipped the coffee and nearly moaned at how good it tasted. It was strong and bitter, but it was hot and real, and it made her feel more human than she had in days. Jesse returned to his crate, giving her space, and she noticed he was being very careful not to stare at her. "How bad is the storm?" she asked after a moment. "Bad. Worst I have seen in years. We are not going anywhere today, that much is certain. Maybe not tomorrow either, but we have enough wood to keep the fire going, and I have some supplies in my saddle bags. We will not starve." Hannah nodded, looking around the small cabin properly for the first time. It was crude but functional, probably built as an emergency shelter for ranchers caught out in bad weather. There was the fireplace, a few crates that served as furniture, some hooks on the walls for hanging gear, and a small pile of split wood in the corner. Through a gap in the interior wall, she could see into the lean-to where Jesse's horse stood, the animal's breath steaming in the cold air. "You said you work at the Triple Creek Ranch," she asked, wanting to understand who this man was who had saved her. "Yes, for about 3 years now. I came out from Missouri after the war looking for a fresh start. The ranch owner, Mr. Carson, gave me a chance when I needed one, taught me everything about ranching. I owe him a lot." Jesse paused, then asked gently, "What about you? What brought you out here in the middle of winter?" Hannah stared into her coffee cup, the memories rising up painful and sharp. "I was with a wagon train. We left Kansas in October, heading for California. The wagon master said we would stop in Salida for the winter and continue in spring. But the storm hit, and everything went wrong. The wagon scattered, I lost my horse, I lost everything. What about your family? Were they with the train?" "I have no family." The words came out flat and emotionless. "My mother died 6 years ago from consumption. My father died in a fire that destroyed our farm last September. I had nothing left in Kansas, so I sold what remained and joined the wagon train. I thought maybe in California I could start over, find work as a seamstress or a teacher. I thought maybe there could be a future for me somewhere. She laughed bitterly. I was a fool. You are not a fool, Jesse said firmly. You are a survivor. Do you know how many people would have just laid down and died in that storm? But you kept walking. You kept fighting. That takes strength, Hannah. Real strength. I did lay down, she reminded him quietly. You found me because I had given up. But you fought to get that far. You lasted long enough for me to find you. That counts for something. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Listen, I know what it is like to lose everything. When I came back from the war, my family farm was gone. My parents dead from sickness, my brother killed at Shiloh. I had nothing and no one. I drifted for a while doing odd jobs, barely scraping by. There were days I thought about just giving up, just letting the world swallow me whole. But something kept me going, some stubborn part of me that refused to quit, and eventually I found the ranch, found a place where I belonged. You will find that too, Hannah. I know you will. Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. He understood. He knew what it was like to stand at the edge of the abyss and have to choose whether to jump or step back, and he had stepped back. Maybe, just maybe, she could too. Thank you, she said softly, for saving me, for caring, for giving me a reason to keep fighting. You do not need to thank me. I am just glad I found you in time. He stood and moved to check her clothes by the fire. These are almost dry. Another hour or so and you should be able to put them back on. Are you hungry? I have some jerky and hardtack, not fancy, but it will keep your strength up. I am starving, Hannah admitted. Jesse brought her some of the food and she ate slowly, savoring every bite. As she ate, they talked. Jesse told her more about the ranch, about the work he did, about the vast stretches of land and the cattle that roamed them. He told her about Salida, the small town that was growing rapidly with the arrival of the railroad, about the mountains that surrounded it and the rivers that ran cold and clear even in summer. Hannah, in turn, found herself opening up in ways she had not expected. She told him about her childhood in Kansas, about helping her mother in the garden and learning to sew and cook. She told him about the one-room schoolhouse where she had been educated, about her love of reading and how she had dreamed, as a girl, of seeing the ocean someday. She told him about the fire, about watching everything she had ever known turn to ash and smoke, about the hollow feeling that had settled in her chest and never quite gone away. I felt like I was just going through the motions after that, she admitted. Like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. The wagon train, the journey, all of it felt unreal. And when I got lost in the storm, when I fell in that snow, I just thought maybe this was how it was supposed to end. Maybe I was supposed to disappear like everything else had disappeared. No, Jesse said firmly. You were not supposed to disappear. You were supposed to survive. You were supposed to find your way to this cabin, to me. Maybe it sounds strange, but I do not think it was an accident that we crossed paths. I think maybe we were both supposed to be here right now for a reason. What reason? Hannah asked, though her heart was beating faster. Jesse met her eyes and something passed between them, something electric and undeniable. I do not know yet, but I think we will find out. The storm raged on through the rest of that day and into the night, but inside the small cabin, a different kind of warmth was growing. Jesse and Hannah talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams and fears, building a connection that felt both sudden and inevitable. Jesse made them a simple dinner of beans and bacon from his supplies, and they ate sitting cross-legged by the fire, the blankets wrapped around Hannah's shoulders. You are a good cook, Hannah said, surprised by how much she was enjoying the simple meal. Jesse laughed. You must be really hungry if you think this is good cooking. Wait until you taste Cookie's food at the ranch. Now that is good cooking. The man can do things with a Dutch oven that border on magic. I look forward to it, Hannah said, then paused. That is, if I am still around when we get back to civilization. Where else would you be? Jesse asked, his brow furrowing. Hannah shrugged, trying to keep her voice light. I do not know. I suppose I will try to find the wagon train if they made it through the storm. Or maybe find work in Salada if they will have me. The wagon train is probably long gone by now, assuming they survived, and as for work. Jesse hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. What if you came to the ranch? Mr. Carson is always looking for help, and his wife would probably love to have another woman around. She handles the house and the cooking for the hands, but it is a lot of work. I am sure she could use an extra pair of hands, especially someone who can sew and has some education. Hannah stared at him. You would do that for me, speak to your employer on my behalf, of course. Why would I not? Jesse looked genuinely confused by the question. Because you barely know me, because I am a stranger you found in the snow. Because most people would not go out of their way like that. Maybe most people, Jesse agreed. But I am not most people, and you are not just some stranger to me, Hannah. I know that might sound crazy given we only met yesterday, but I feel like I have known you longer. Like we were meant to meet, and I want to help you, not just to save your life but to give you a real chance at building something new. Will you at least think about it? Hannah felt tears prickling at her eyes again, but this time they were not tears of despair. Yes, I will think about it. Thank you, Jesse. You have given me more than I ever thought I would have again. You deserve it, he said simply. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness. That night, Jesse insisted Hannah take the pile of blankets near the fire while he made do with his saddle blanket and his coat in the corner. Hannah protested, saying he should at least share the warmth, but Jesse was firm. It would not be proper, he said, his cheeks coloring. You have been through enough without worrying about your reputation. Besides, I have slept in worse conditions. I will be fine. But as Hannah lay in her nest of blankets, listening to the storm howl outside and the fire crackle beside her, she found herself wishing things were different. Wishing that it would be proper for Jesse to lie beside her, to hold her, to share his warmth and his strength. The feeling surprised her with its intensity. She had never been one for flights of romantic fancy. Even back in Kansas, when other girls her age were courting and getting married, Hannah had remained practical and reserved, focused on helping her parents and managing the farm. But there was something about Jesse that bypassed all her usual defenses. Maybe it was because he had saved her life. Maybe it was because he had seen her at her absolute lowest and had not turned away. Or maybe it was simply that in him, she recognized a kindred spirit, someone who had also known loss and loneliness, and had somehow found the strength to keep going. Whatever the reason, as she drifted off to sleep, Hannah knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her that her life had changed forever the moment Jesse Lawson had found her in that snow. The storm finally broke on the morning of the third day. Hannah woke to an almost eerie silence after so many hours of howling wind, and when Jesse pushed open the cabin door, the sunlight that spilled in was blindingly bright against the pristine white snow. "It is over," he announced, grinning. "We can head out within the hour if you are feeling strong enough." Hannah, now back in her own clothes which had finally dried completely, nodded. "I am ready, more than ready." They prepared to leave quickly. Jesse saddled Buck, his sturdy bay gelding, and secured his gear. Then he helped Hannah up onto the horse before swinging up behind her. With his arms on either side of her to hold the reins, Hannah found herself pressed back against his chest, very aware of his warmth and strength behind her. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Yes, she managed, hoping he could not feel how fast her heart was beating. The ride to the ranch took most of the day. The snow was deep, and Buck had to work hard to push through it, but the horse was strong and steady, and Jesse clearly knew the land well despite the transformed landscape. As they rode, Jesse pointed out landmarks, telling Hannah about the area. That peak there, that is Mount Shavano, and over there you can just see the edge of the Arkansas River. In summer it is beautiful here, all green and gold. In winter, well, you have seen what winter is like. He said this with a wry humor that made Hannah smile. They passed no one on the trail, which Jesse said was not surprising given the storm. Most people with any sense would be staying close to home until the roads were clearer. But as they drew closer to the ranch, they began to see signs of life. Distant herds of cattle, their dark shapes standing out against the snow and smoke rising from chimneys. That is the Triple Creek, Jesse said, pointing ahead to a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley. Home. The ranch was larger than Hannah had expected. There was a big main house built of logs and stone, a bunkhouse for the hands, a substantial barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. As they rode into the yard, people began to emerge from the buildings, clearly surprised to see Jesse returning with a passenger. An older man, tall and weathered with a full gray beard, strode out from the main house. "Lawson, we were starting to worry about you, son. That storm was a hell of a thing." "Mr. Carson," Jesse greeted, dismounting and then helping Hannah down. "I took shelter in the line shack up in the north pasture, and I found someone else who needed shelter too. This is Miss Hannah Douglas. She was separated from a wagon train in the storm." Mr. Carson's weathered face softened as he looked at Hannah. "Miss Douglas, welcome to the Triple Creek. You look like you have been through quite an ordeal. Come inside, please. My wife will want to make sure you are all right." Before Hannah could respond, a woman bustled out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, plump and motherly, with graying brown hair and kind blue eyes. "Oh, you poor dear. Come in, come in. You must be frozen and exhausted. Jesse Lawson, you bring her right inside this instant." "Yes, madam, Mrs. Carson," Jesse said, grinning at Hannah's wide-eyed expression. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of baking bread and something savory simmering on the stove. Mrs. Carson immediately ushered Hannah to a seat by the big iron cookstove and pressed a cup of hot tea into her hands. "Now then, tell me everything," Mrs. Carson commanded gently. "Jesse said you were with a wagon train." Hannah told her story again, with Jesse filling in the parts about finding her in the snow and sheltering in the line shack. Mrs. Carson listened with growing concern and sympathy, and by the time Hannah finished, the older woman's eyes were bright with tears. "You poor, poor girl. To lose so much and then to nearly die in that terrible storm. But thank the Lord Jesse found you. He is a good man, our Jesse. The best." She patted Hannah's hand. "Now, you are going to stay here with us for as long as you need. We have a spare room and I could certainly use the help around the house. Can you cook?" "So." "Yes, madam. My mother taught me both. I am a good hand with a needle and I can cook plain food well enough. Plain food is all we need around here. These ranch hands would eat boot leather if you fried it up right." Mrs. Carson laughed. "It is settled then. You will stay with us, help me with the house and the cooking, and in return you will have room and board and a small wage. Does that sound fair?" Hannah could barely believe what she was hearing. "More than fair, madam, but are you sure? I do not want to impose." "Impose? Heavens, girl, you would be doing me a favor. Do you know how tiring it is to cook for 15 hungry ranch hands 3 times a day, plus keep this house running? I will be glad for the help. Besides," she added with a knowing smile, glancing at Jesse, who stood nearby. "I think you will fit in just fine around here." Mr. Carson, who had been listening from his seat at the kitchen table, nodded his approval. "It is settled, then. Welcome to the Triple Creek, Miss Douglas. Jesse, you take the rest of the day to recover from your ordeal. I will have Miller and Thompson handle your chores." "Thank you, sir," Jesse said. He looked at Hannah, and the warmth in his eyes made her stomach flutter. "I will see you at supper, then." "Yes," Hannah said softly. "I will be here." After Jesse left, Mrs. Carson showed Hannah to the spare room. It was small but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, and even a small window that looked out over the mountains. Hannah sat on the bed and had to fight back tears. Less than a week ago, she had been convinced her life was over. Now she had a place to stay, work to do, and the possibility of something more with a man who had already shown her more kindness than she had thought still existed in the world. That evening, Hannah helped Mrs. Carson prepare supper for the ranch hands. The bunkhouse had its own dining area, and the men filed in just after sunset, stomping snow off their boots and talking and laughing. Hannah was nervous about meeting so many new people at once, but Mrs. Carson stayed by her side, introducing her to each of the hands. There was Cookie, the grizzled cook who seemed initially suspicious of having someone else working in his domain but warmed up when Hannah complimented his sourdough starter. There was Miller and Thompson, the two cowboys Mr. Carson had mentioned, both young and friendly. There were the other hands, ranging in age from barely 20 to well into their 50s, all of them weathered by years of outdoor work but polite and respectful. And then there was Jesse. He came in last, freshly washed and shaved, his dark hair still damp. When he saw Hannah, his whole face lit up in a way that made several of the other cowboys exchange knowing glances. "Miss Douglas," he said formally, but his eyes were warm. "It is good to see you looking so well." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," Hannah replied, matching his formal tone but unable to keep the smile off her face. "I feel much better." Supper was a lively affair, with the men talking about the storm damage, the cattle they needed to check on, and plans for the coming weeks. Hannah mostly listened, learning about the rhythms and routines of ranch life. But she was always aware of Jesse, seated across the long table from her, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. After the meal, as she and Mrs. Carson were cleaning up, the older woman said quietly, "Jesse is a good man, you know, the best worker we have, and honest as the day is long. He has been alone for too long, I think. Since he came here, he has thrown himself into his work but never let anyone get too close. Until now." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "Mrs. Carson, I do not know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do, dear. I saw how he looked at you, and how you looked at him. There is nothing wrong with it, you know. Sometimes people meet at just the right moment, when they both need each other the most. Jesse saved your life, but something tells me you might just save his too in a different way." Hannah did not know what to say to that, so she just kept washing dishes, her mind whirling with possibilities and fears and a strange, tentative hope. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Hannah threw herself into her work, helping Mrs. Carson with everything from cooking and cleaning to mending clothes and organizing supplies. The older woman was patient and kind, treating Hannah more like a daughter than an employee. Mr. Carson was gruff but fair, and the ranch hands were respectful and friendly. But it was Jesse who occupied most of Hannah's thoughts. They saw each other at meals and often in the evenings. Jesse would find excuses to come up to the main house, bringing in wood for the fire or checking on some repair that needed doing. He and Hannah would talk, their conversations ranging from light-hearted banter to deep discussions about life and loss and dreams for the future. Hannah learned that Jesse had been just 18 when he went off to war, full of idealistic notions about glory and honor. He had come back 4 years later, hardened and haunted, having seen things no young man should ever have to see. He had drifted west, working odd jobs, never staying anywhere long until he stumbled into Salida half-starved and desperate. Mr. Carson had taken one look at him and given him a job, no questions asked. "He saved my life," Jesse told Hannah one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Just like I saved yours. Funny how that works sometimes. How one person's kindness can change everything." "You are going to make me cry again," Hannah said, wiping at her eyes. "I am sorry. I did not mean to make you sad." "I am not sad. These are happy tears. I did not think I would ever feel happy again, but I do, here with you with the Carsons. I feel like maybe I have found a home." Jesse reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "I am glad. You deserve to be happy, Hannah. You deserve every good thing." They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. And Hannah thought that maybe, just maybe, this was what hope felt like. Not the desperate, frantic hope of someone drowning, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who has found solid ground. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, the relationship between Hannah and Jesse deepened. They were careful to be proper, always conscious of the fact that they were living and working in close quarters with others, but everyone on the ranch could see what was developing between them. The other cowboys teased Jesse mercilessly, but it was all good-natured, and several of them told Hannah privately that they had never seen Jesse so happy. Mrs. Carson was delighted, frequently arranging situations that would put Jesse and Hannah together, whether it was sending them both to town for supplies or asking Jesse to help Hannah with some task that required 2 people. Mr. Carson pretended not to notice, but Hannah caught him smiling more than once when he saw her and Jesse together. In March, when the snow had mostly melted and the first green shoots were beginning to appear on the hills, Jesse asked Hannah to go riding with him. It was a Saturday, and there was less work to do, so Mrs. Carson shooed them off with a picnic basket and instructions not to hurry back. Jesse borrowed a gentle mare for Hannah, and they rode out into the foothills, following the winding path of a creek that was swollen with snowmelt. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and fresh earth, and the sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at it. They stopped in a meadow carpeted with early wildflowers, and Jesse spread out a blanket for their picnic. As they ate the food Mrs. Carson had packed, they talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that felt both familiar and precious. "Hannah," Jesse said after a while, his voice suddenly serious, "there is something I need to tell you." Hannah's heart skipped. "What is it?" "I have been thinking a lot these past months, about my life, about what I want for the future, and I have realized something." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you in that snow, when you looked up at me with those eyes that had given up on everything, and something in my chest just cracked wide open. I love your strength, your kindness, your courage. I love the way you laugh at my stupid jokes and the way you hum when you are cooking. I love everything about you, Hannah Douglas, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." Hannah felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was smiling so wide her face hurt. "Jesse, I love you too. I have been so scared to say it, so scared to hope that you might feel the same way, but I do. I love you so much." Jesse cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Then marry me. Let me be your hope, not just for today, but for every day for the rest of our lives. Let me give you the home and the family you lost. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Please, Hannah, will you marry me?" "Yes," Hannah whispered, and then louder, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Jesse pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Hannah buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, sunshine and leather and something uniquely Jesse. When he finally pulled back, it was only to tilt her chin up and kiss her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Hannah's first kiss, and it was everything she had never dared to dream it could be. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised. "I could never regret this," Hannah said. "You saved me, Jesse. In every way a person can be saved. How could I ever regret that?" They rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, and when they announced their engagement, Mrs. Carson actually squealed with delight and pulled them both into a crushing hug. Mr. Carson shook Jesse's hand with a gruff, "About time, son," and kissed Hannah on the cheek. The ranch hands cheered and insisted on celebrating with a special dinner that night, with Cookie pulling out his secret stash of good whiskey for toasts. It was decided that they would marry in June, giving them time to make proper arrangements and for Jesse to build them a small house on a piece of land. Mr. Carson offered to sell him at a very generous price. The land was good, with water and grazing, enough for Jesse to start his own small herd while continuing to work for the ranch. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Jesse worked on the house every spare moment, with the other ranch hands pitching in to help. It was small but solid, built with logs and stone, with 2 rooms that could be expanded later when, God willing, there were children to fill them. Hannah spent her time preparing, sewing curtains and quilts, learning everything Mrs. Carson could teach her about managing a household. She also wrote a letter to the wagon train company's office in Kansas City, inquiring about the fate of the train she had been traveling with. The response came in May. The train had made it through the storm and continued on to California in early spring. They had searched for her as much as they could, but when no trace was found, she had been presumed dead. The letter was matter of fact and final, and Hannah realized that her old life truly was gone. Everything that came now was new, built from the ground up, and that thought no longer scared her the way it once had in early June. Hannah and Jesse were married in the small church in Salida. It was a simple ceremony, with Mrs. Carson standing up as Hannah's witness and Mr. Carson standing with Jesse. The other ranch hands filled the pews, along with various townspeople who had befriended Hannah over the past months. Hannah wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple but elegant, made of pale blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Jesse wore his best clothes, his dark hair slicked back, looking nervous and proud and so handsome that Hannah could hardly believe he was about to become her husband. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about weathering storms together and building a life on faith and trust. When he asked Jesse if he would take Hannah as his wife, Jesse's voice rang out clear and strong. "I will." And when he asked Hannah the same question, she looked into Jesse's dark eyes, remembering the moment he had found her in the snow, remembering his promise to be her hope, and she said with all the conviction in her heart, "I will." The kiss that sealed their marriage was chaste, appropriate for the church setting, but it still made Hannah's toes curl in her shoes. When they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, the cheers that went up could probably be heard all the way to Denver. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than Hannah had ever seen in one place. Cookie had outdone himself, and there was music and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Hannah danced with Jesse, with Mr. Carson, with several of the ranch hands, but always she came back to Jesse, her husband, the man who had saved her and loved her and given her a reason to believe in tomorrow. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Jesse took Hannah's hand and led her away from the party, toward the small house he had built for them. It sat on a rise overlooking the valley, with a view of the mountains that took Hannah's breath away every time she saw it. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," Jesse said, sweeping her up into his arms to carry her over the threshold. Hannah laughed, clinging to his neck. "I could get used to this." Inside, someone had lit lanterns and the fire, making the small space warm and welcoming. Jesse set Hannah down gently, and they stood in the middle of their new home, just looking at each other. "Are you happy?" Jesse asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Hannah replied honestly. "When I was lost in that storm, when I thought I was dying, I could never have imagined this. A home, a husband, a future. You gave me all of that, Jesse." "We gave it to each other," Jesse corrected. "You gave me just as much, Hannah. You gave me a reason to believe that there was more to life than just work and sleep and getting through the days. You made me want to build something, to plan for tomorrow, to hope. I am the one who should be thanking you." Hannah reached up and cupped his face, feeling the slight scratch of stubble under her palms. "Then, let us just agree that we saved each other, and that we are going to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for that second chance." "I can agree to that," Jesse murmured, and then he kissed her again, deeper this time, with all the passion they had been carefully keeping in check for months. Hannah kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all her love and gratitude and desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jesse took her hand and led her to the bedroom, where a beautiful quilt Mrs. Carson had given them as a wedding gift was spread across the bed. What happened next was tender and sweet and occasionally awkward, as first times often are, but it was theirs, and it was perfect in its imperfection. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Hannah's last thought before drifting off was that she was finally, truly home. The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. There were hard frosts that killed some of their early crops, and there was a scare when several head of cattle fell sick, though thankfully most recovered. Jesse worked long hours, trying to balance his responsibilities at the ranch with building up their own small operation. Hannah threw herself into making their house a home, learning to manage their limited resources, and to cook on the temperamental wood stove that seemed to have a mind of its own. But through it all, they had each other. On hard days when Jesse came home exhausted and discouraged, Hannah was there to listen and encourage him. When Hannah struggled with loneliness, living out on their own land instead of at the main ranch house, Jesse made sure to spend quality time with her every evening, no matter how tired he was. They talked about everything, laughed together, solved problems together, and slowly built a life that was uniquely theirs. In the spring of their second year together, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited until she was sure before telling Jesse. She chose a quiet evening when he had finished his work early and they were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "Jesse," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement and nerves, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her immediately, always attuned to her moods. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Jesse just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, growing wider and wider until he was grinning like a fool. "A baby? Really? We are going to have a baby?" "Yes," Hannah laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We are going to be parents." Jesse let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she shrieked at him to put her down before he made her dizzy. When he finally set her down, He immediately dropped to his knees and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one," he said softly. "This is your papa. I just want you to know that you are already so loved, and I cannot wait to meet you." Hannah ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what it felt like to be truly happy, she realized. Not the absence of problems or pain, but the presence of love strong enough to weather anything. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Hannah had some difficult days with nausea and fatigue. Mrs. Carson was a constant source of advice and support, and the other women from town and neighboring ranches welcomed Hannah into their circle of mothers and mothers-to-be. Jesse was attentive and protective, sometimes to the point of being overprotective, until Hannah had to gently remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. In early November, on a cold but clear morning, Hannah went into labor. Jesse rode like the devil to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Fletcher who had delivered half the babies in the valley. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Jesse paced outside the bedroom, occasionally allowed in to hold Hannah's hand and wipe her forehead, but mostly kept out by Mrs. Fletcher, who said firmly that men just got in the way. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry rang out, strong and indignant. Mrs. Fletcher emerged from the bedroom smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Lawson, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is doing well, though she is tired. You can go in now." Jesse burst into the room and found Hannah propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she whispered. Jesse approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had dark hair like his father and was scrunching up his little face, preparing for another wail. Jesse reached out with one finger and gently touched the baby's cheek, and the infant immediately turned toward the touch, rooting. "He is perfect," Jesse breathed. "Hannah, he is absolutely perfect. You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Hannah said. "Do you want to hold him?" Jesse carefully took the baby, cradling him against his chest. The infant settled immediately, apparently soothed by the sound of his father's heartbeat. Jesse looked down at his son with an expression of such fierce love and protectiveness that Hannah felt fresh tears welling up. "What should we name him?" Jesse asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Hannah said, "What about Thomas, after my father? His middle name was Thomas." Jesse looked up at her, his own eyes bright with emotion. "Thomas Lawson, I like it. Tom for short." "Tom," Hannah repeated, smiling. "Welcome to the world, Thomas Lawson. We have been waiting for you." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, but Hannah and Jesse navigated them together. Jesse was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Tom at night when Hannah was too exhausted to move. He sang to the baby in his rough cowboy's voice, songs from his childhood and from the war, and Tom seemed to find them soothing. Mr. and Mrs. Carson were delighted to be honorary grandparents, and the ranch hands competed to be Tom's favorite uncle. The small house that had seemed so cozy for two people felt perfectly right for three, and Hannah marveled at how quickly her life had changed from the desperate woman lost in a blizzard to a wife and mother surrounded by love. As Tom grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Jesse's hard work paid off, and their small herd grew. They were able to buy more land, to build a proper barn, to plan for the future with confidence. Hannah's days were full of caring for Tom, managing the household, helping out at the main ranch when Mrs. Carson needed an extra pair of hands. It was hard work, but it was good work, and she went to bed each night tired but satisfied, wrapped in Jesse's arms. When Tom was 3 years old, Hannah became pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous and more excited, knowing what to expect. Jesse was thrilled, though he worried about Hannah, remembering how difficult the first labor had been. But Hannah assured him that second babies were often easier, and Mrs. Fletcher confirmed this. She was right. The labor, while still painful, was shorter and less complicated. In the spring of 1888, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Grace, after Hannah's mother. Grace was tiny and delicate, with Hannah's light hair and Jesse's dark eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her little finger. Tom was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Jesse built him a small stool so he could stand beside Hannah while she changed Grace's diaper or dressed her, and Tom took his role as big brother very seriously. Watching her husband with their children, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed them, Hannah fell in love with Jesse all over again. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Hannah and Jesse's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were dry years and wet years, years when the cattle prices were good and years when they were terrible. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of ranch life. Tom broke his arm falling from a tree when he was 6, and Grace had a bout of scarlet fever at 4 that terrified them all until she recovered. But through everything, they faced it together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. Jesse often told Hannah that she was his rock, his anchor, the thing that kept him grounded when the world threatened to overwhelm him. And Hannah always replied that he was her hope, just as he had promised to be that day in the snow, and that she trusted him with her life and her heart completely. When Tom was 10 and Grace was 7, Hannah became pregnant one more time. She was older now, nearing 35, and both she and Jesse were a bit worried about the pregnancy. But Hannah was healthy and strong, and Dr. Martin, who had moved to Salida a few years before, said he saw no reason for concern. This pregnancy was different from the first two. Hannah was more tired, carrying the baby lower, and was convinced it was going to be another girl. Jesse said he did not care what they had, as long as both Hannah and the baby were healthy. Tom hoped for a brother, and Grace insisted she wanted a sister. In late fall, Hannah went into labor earlier than expected. Jesse rode for the doctor, who arrived quickly, and Mrs. Carson came to help and to keep the children occupied. This labor was faster than the others, almost too fast, and within a few hours, Hannah was holding another baby boy. "Looks like you got your brother, Tom," Jesse said, ruffling his son's hair as the boy peered at his new sibling. "What are you going to name him?" Grace asked, bouncing with excitement. Hannah and Jesse looked at each other. They had not fully decided on a name, having been so focused on preparing for the birth itself. But now, looking at their third child, Hannah said, "What about Samuel? It means heard by God, and I think our prayers have certainly been heard." "Samuel Lawson," Jesse said, testing it out. "Sam." "Yes, I like it. Welcome to the family, Sam." With 3 children, the small house was definitely too small. Over the next year, Jesse and some of the ranch hands built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The expansion made the house feel like a proper family home, and Hannah took great pleasure in decorating it, making each room comfortable and welcoming. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, by school recitals and church socials, by the daily rhythms of ranch life. Tom grew into a serious, responsible young man, helping his father with the cattle and showing a real aptitude for ranching. Grace was bright and curious, always reading, always asking questions, and Hannah suspected she had inherited her mother's love of learning. Sam was the wild child, always into mischief, always testing boundaries, but with such charm and sweetness that it was hard to stay mad at him for long. Mr. Carson passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1892, at the age of 72. His death was a blow to everyone who knew him, but especially to Jesse, who had looked up to the older man as a father figure. At the funeral, Jesse spoke about how Mr. Carson had given him a chance when no one else would, had taught him what it meant to be a good man, had shown him that kindness and strength were not opposites, but complements. Mrs. Carson continued to run the ranch with the help of a foreman, but it was clear her heart was no longer in it. A year after her husband's death, she made Jesse an offer. She would sell him the ranch at a fair price, with terms he could manage if he would take it over and keep it running the way her husband would have wanted. Jesse and Hannah discussed it long into the night. It would be a huge responsibility, but it was also an opportunity they had never dreamed of. Finally, they agreed. Jesse accepted Mrs. Carson's offer, and they became the owners of the Triple Creek Ranch. Mrs. Carson moved into a small house in town, where she could be close to the church and her friends, and visited the ranch often to see how things were going under Jesse's management. The ranch continued to thrive. He was a fair boss, firm but just, and the hands respected him. Hannah helped manage the business side, keeping the books and handling correspondence. It was a partnership in every sense, and the ranch prospered under their joint care. As the 19th century drew to a close and the new century began, Hannah sometimes looked back on her life and marveled at the journey she had taken. From the desperate, hopeless woman lost in a blizzard to a wife, mother, and ranch owner, the transformation was almost unbelievable. But it was real as Jesse's arms around her at night, as real as her children's laughter filling the house, as real as the satisfaction of a hard day's work well done. Tom married at 23 to a sweet young woman named Ellen from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far edge of the property. Within a year, they had given Jesse and Hannah their first grandchild, a little girl they named Hannah after her grandmother. Holding her namesake in her arms, Hannah cried tears of joy and gratitude for the full circle her life had made. Grace, true to the expectations Hannah had had for her, became a teacher. She taught at the schoolhouse in Salida, inspiring young minds the way her mother had always hoped to do. She married a doctor who came to town, a kind man named Richard who adored her, and they had 2 children, both boys. Sam, the wild child, surprised everyone by becoming a rancher like his father. He worked the land with passion and skill, and eventually took over more and more of the day-to-day operations of the Triple Creek, leaving Jesse free to spend more time with Hannah and their growing brood of grandchildren. On their 30th wedding anniversary, in the summer of 1917, Jesse and Hannah renewed their vows in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Their children and grandchildren gathered around them, and as they spoke the same words they had spoken 30 years before, Hannah looked into Jesse's eyes and saw the same love and devotion that had been there from the beginning. "I will be your hope from now on," Jesse said softly, echoing the words he had spoken to her that day in the snow so long ago. "And you have been," Hannah replied, tears streaming down her face. "Every single day you have been, and I will love you for the rest of my life and beyond." They kissed while their family cheered, and Hannah thought about the woman she had been at 22, lost and frozen and ready to give up. If she could speak to that woman now, she would tell her to hold on, to keep fighting, because the best was yet to come. She would tell her that sometimes the darkest moments come just before the dawn, and that hope, real hope, could be found in the most unexpected places. As the party continued around them, Jesse pulled Hannah aside to the spot where he had proposed all those years ago. The meadow was in full bloom, carpeted with wildflowers, and the mountains rose up around them, eternal and unchanging. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Jesse asked, holding both her hands. "Of course. How could I forget? It was the day you asked me to marry you. The day everything changed." "Everything changed before that," Jesse corrected gently. "It changed the moment I found you in that snow, the moment I looked into your eyes and knew, somehow, that you were going to be the most important person in my life. I knew it before I even knew your name." "I felt it too," Hannah admitted. "Even through the cold and the fear, I felt it, like a spark of warmth in the darkness, like the first hint of spring after a long winter." Jesse lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. "I love you, Hannah Lawson. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I did not think that was possible. You have given me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, a reason to get up every morning and be grateful for another day. I will never stop being thankful that I found you in that storm. And I will never stop being thankful that you refused to let me give up," Hannah said. "You saved my life, Jesse. In every way that matters, you saved me, and I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of that gift. You were always worthy. You just needed someone to see it, to see you." Jesse cupped her face in his weathered hands. "Here is to 30 more years, my love, and to whatever comes after, because as long as I have you, I have everything I need." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the fading light. Two people who had found each other in the most desperate of circumstances and had built something beautiful from the ashes of their old lives. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life and love, filled with children and grandchildren, with hope and promise, and the certain knowledge that they had made something lasting. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, Hannah rested her head on Jesse's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. This was her home. This man, this land, this family. This was everything she had thought she had lost that day in the snow, and so much more. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Jesse asked, his arms tightening around her. "For being my hope. For never giving up on me. For loving me through all the years, through all the changes, through everything. Thank you for finding me, Jesse Lawson." "It was my privilege," Jesse said softly, "and it always will be." They walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate with their family, ready to continue the life they had built together. The blizzard that had nearly killed Hannah had instead brought her the greatest gift she had ever received. It had brought her Jesse, and Jesse had brought her home. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Hannah sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force had guided Jesse to her that day. Because of him, she had lived. Because of him, she had loved. Because of him, she had found her way from despair to hope, from loneliness to belonging, from the edge of death to the fullness of life. The story that had begun in a blizzard, with a woman who had lost all hope and a cowboy who had refused to let her die, had become a love story for the ages. It was not a story of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had started with one. It was a story of quiet devotion, of daily choices to love and support each other, of two damaged souls who had found healing in each other's arms. It was, Hannah thought as she looked around at her family, at the ranch she and Jesse had built, at the mountains that had witnessed their entire journey, a story worth living. And she would live it, savoring every moment for as long as she was given, because that was what hope looked like. Not some abstract concept or distant dream, but this. A man's hand in hers, a house filled with laughter, a life built on love and trust, and the certain knowledge that they would face whatever came next together. Jesse caught her eye across the crowd and winked, and Hannah's heart, which had been frozen solid that day in the snow, swelled with warmth and love. She smiled back at him, this man who had been her salvation and her partner, her hope and her home. And in that smile was everything: gratitude and love, contentment and joy, and the promise that no matter what storms might come, they would weather them together just as they always had. The blizzard had taken everything from her, but Jesse had given it all back and more, so much more. And that, Hannah thought, was the greatest gift of all. Years continued to roll by like the seasons, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Hannah and Jesse grew older, their hair turning silver, their faces lined with the years of hard work and laughter. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and tested by trials, emerging each time more resilient and deep. In 1920, when Hannah was 59 and Jesse 62, Mrs. Carson passed away peacefully, surrounded by the family she had helped to build. At her funeral, Hannah spoke about how the older woman had taken her in when she had nothing, had taught her what it meant to be strong and kind at the same time, had shown her that family was not just blood but choice. "She was like a mother to me," Hannah said, her voice breaking. "When I had lost everything, she gave me a place to belong. She gave me purpose. She loved me as if I were her own daughter, and I will carry that love with me for the rest of my days." Jesse stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, offering silent support as he always did. After the funeral, they visited Mr. and Mrs. Carson's graves, placing flowers on both and saying a prayer of thanks for the kindness that had changed their lives. The 1920s brought change to the ranch and to the world. The automobile became more common, though Jesse stubbornly preferred his horses. The radio brought news and entertainment from distant places. The world was becoming more connected, more modern, but the Triple Creek remained a bastion of traditional values and hard work. Tom and his wife Ellen had 3 children now, and all of them showed an interest in ranching. Grace and Richard had added a daughter to their 2 sons, a bright little thing who loved to read as much as her mother. Sam had married a spirited woman named Catherine, and they had twins, a boy and a girl, who were the terror and delight of the entire ranch. Hannah and Jesse found themselves at the center of an ever-growing web of family, and they loved every minute of it. Their house was always full of grandchildren seeking stories or cookies or just their grandparents' presents. Jesse taught his grandsons to ride and rope, passing on skills that had been handed down to him. Hannah taught her granddaughters to sew and cook, but also to read and think and question, wanting them to have opportunities she had never had. On quiet evenings, when the grandchildren had gone home and the ranch was settling in for the night, Hannah and Jesse would sit on their porch, the same porch where they had courted so many years ago, and talk about their day, their family, their life. "You ever think about that day?" Jesse asked one evening in the summer of 1923. "The day I found you in the snow, all the time," Hannah admitted. "How could I not? That was the day my real life began. Everything before that was just prologue. I think about it too. About how easily I could have missed you, how I almost did not check that line shack, how the storm could have kept me from finding you. It scares me sometimes, thinking how close we came to never meeting. But we did meet. We did find each other. That is what matters." Hannah reached over and took his hand. "Do you remember what you said to me? When I told you I had no hope left, I said I would be your hope from now on. You kept that promise. Every single day for almost 40 years you have kept that promise. You have been my hope, my strength, my home. And I love you more now than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." Jesse raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "The feeling is entirely mutual, my love. Entirely mutual." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that never got old no matter how many times they saw them. The mountains stood eternal, and the land they had worked so hard to build spread out before them, testament to their love and their labor. In 1925, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren present. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the trees and food enough to feed an army. There was music and dancing, and at one point, Jesse pulled Hannah into his arms and they danced as they had on their wedding day, a bit slower now, a bit more careful, but with the same love and joy. 45 years, Jesse mused as they swayed to the music. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like forever, but it has never felt like long enough. We still have time, Hannah said, resting her head on his shoulder. We have today, we have tomorrow. We have as long as we are given, and I intend to savor every moment of it. So do I, Jesse agreed. So do I. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, the world outside the ranch changed dramatically. The stock market crashed, the Great Depression settled over the country like a shroud, and many people lost everything. The ranch, with its diversified operations and careful management, weathered the storm better than most. There were hard times, certainly, times when they had to tighten their belts and make do with less. But they had food from their garden and their livestock. They had each other and their family, and compared to many, they were wealthy beyond measure. Jesse and Hannah made a point of helping their neighbors when they could, sharing food, offering work, doing what they could to ease the suffering around them. They remembered what it was like to have nothing, to be desperate and alone, and they were determined to help others the way they had been helped. In the spring of 1933, Jesse had a scare. He collapsed while working with the cattle, and Dr. Martin, who had been their friend for decades, diagnosed him with a weak heart. He prescribed rest and less strenuous work, and for the first time in his life, Jesse had to step back and let others do what he had always done himself. It was hard for him, this forced slowing down. He had always been a man of action, always working, always doing. But Hannah was there, as she had always been, helping him adjust, finding ways to keep him occupied without overtaxing his heart. He spent more time with the grandchildren, teaching them what he knew, passing on his wisdom. He read more, something he had never had much time for before. And he spent quiet evenings with Hannah, talking about their life, their memories, the things they had built together. "I am not ready to go yet," he told her one night, his voice rough with emotion. "There is still so much I want to do, so much I want to see. I want to meet my great-grandchildren. I want to see Tom take over the ranch completely. I want to grow old with you, Hannah, really old." "Then we will," Hannah said firmly, though her heart was breaking at the fear in his eyes. "You are going to be fine, Jesse Lawson. You are the strongest man I know, and a little thing like a weak heart is not going to stop you. We have weathered worse storms than this, you and I." And somehow, against the odds, Jesse did improve. Whether it was Hannah's fierce determination, or Dr. Martin's treatment, or simply Jesse's own stubborn refusal to give up, he regained his strength. He never went back to the hard physical labor of his younger days, but he found a new role on the ranch, as advisor and teacher, and he settled into it with grace. Tom had indeed taken over the day-to-day running of the Triple Creek, with Sam as his second. They consulted Jesse on major decisions, valuing his experience and wisdom, but the younger generation was firmly in charge now. Jesse and Hannah found themselves in the pleasant position of being able to enjoy the fruits of their labor without the constant pressure of management. They traveled a bit, something they had never had time for before. They went to Denver to see the city, to California to see the ocean Hannah had dreamed of as a girl. They visited Grace and her family, and Tom and his, spending time with grandchildren who were now having children of their own. In 1938, on their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a celebration that the whole valley attended. 50 years of marriage was a remarkable achievement, and Jesse and Hannah were living proof that true love could last a lifetime. At the party, their children stood up and gave speeches about their parents, about the example they had set, about the love they had shown not just to each other but to everyone around them. Tom spoke about his father's integrity and work ethic, about how Jesse had taught him that a man's word was his bond, and that treating people with respect was never a sign of weakness. Grace spoke about her mother's strength and kindness, about how Hannah had shown her that women could be both gentle and fierce, nurturing and independent. Sam spoke about both his parents, about how they had built something lasting not just in the ranch but in their family, creating a legacy of love that would endure for generations. When it was their turn to speak, Jesse and Hannah stood together, holding hands as they had through every challenge and triumph of their 50 years together. "I was lost once," Hannah said, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed room. "Lost in a storm, lost in despair, lost in every way a person can be lost. And this man found me. He saved my life, yes, but more than that, he gave me a reason to live. He showed me that love was not something from storybooks, but something real and daily and possible. He made me believe in hope again when I thought hope was gone forever. For 50 years, he has been my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. And if I had to do it all over again, if I had to walk through that blizzard and face that despair again, I would do it in a heartbeat, because it led me to Jesse. It led me home. There was not a dry eye in the house when she finished." Jesse pulled her close, kissing her forehead, and then he spoke. "Hannah says I saved her, but the truth is, she saved me too. I was existing, not living, before I met her. Going through the motions, doing my work, but not really feeling anything deeply. And then I found this incredible woman in the snow, and something in me woke up. She made me want to be better, to do better, to build something lasting. She gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving. She loved me when I did not always deserve it, stood by me through every hardship, celebrated every victory with me. For 50 years, she has been my hope, my heart, my everything. And I will love her until my last breath and beyond." They kissed to thunderous applause, and the party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and joy. Hannah and Jesse danced together, moving slowly, carefully, but with the same love that had carried them through 5 decades. 50 years, Hannah murmured. "Where did the time go?" "I do not know," Jesse admitted, "but I would not trade a single day of it, not one." "Neither would I," Hannah agreed. "Not one. The years after their 50th anniversary were gentle ones." Jesse's health remained fragile, and Hannah devoted herself to caring for him, just as he had once devoted himself to caring for her. They spent their days quietly, enjoying their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, watching the ranch continue to prosper under Tom and Sam's management, finding joy in the simple things. A beautiful sunset, a good book, a cup of coffee shared on the porch. In the fall of 1942, as the world was once again embroiled in war, Jesse's heart finally gave out. He passed away in his sleep, Hannah's hand in his, in the bed they had shared for over 50 years. He was 85 years old, and he had lived a full and meaningful life. Hannah was devastated by his loss, as anyone would be after losing their life partner of nearly 6 decades. But she was not broken. Jesse had given her too much strength for that, had taught her too well how to hope and endure. At his funeral, she stood straight and dry-eyed as she spoke about the man who had been her everything. Jesse Lawson was the best man I ever knew, she said simply. He was kind and strong, gentle and fierce, hardworking and loving. He saved my life once in a literal sense when he found me dying in a blizzard. But he saved my life in so many other ways too, every single day we were together. He taught me what love really means, not just the feeling but the action, the choice to stand by someone through everything. He gave me a family, a home, a life I could never have imagined. And though my heart is breaking that he is gone, I am so grateful for the time we had. 57 years from the day he found me to the day he left me. 57 years of love and laughter and partnership. Not everyone gets that. Not everyone is that blessed. So I will not curse the darkness of his absence. I will celebrate the light of his presence in my life. And I will hold on to the hope he gave me, the hope that someday, somewhere, I will see him again. After Jesse's death, Hannah lived for another 8 years. She remained on the ranch, in the house Jesse had built for her, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She was the matriarch of the family, the keeper of stories, the living link to the past. She told her grandchildren about the old days, about the blizzard that had changed her life, about Jesse and his goodness, about the love that had sustained them through more than half a century. She stayed active and engaged as long as she could, but eventually, age caught up with her. In the winter of 1950, Hannah caught pneumonia. At 89 years old, her body could not fight it off. On a cold December night, surrounded by her family, Hannah slipped away peacefully. Her last words were, "I am ready now. I have had a good life. Tell them all I love them. And Jesse, if you are waiting for me, I am coming home." At her funeral, her children and grandchildren spoke about Hannah's strength and grace, about her kindness and wisdom, about the legacy she had left in the family she had built and the ranch she had helped to create. They spoke about her love for Jesse and his love for her, about how even death had not diminished what they had shared. They buried Hannah next to Jesse, in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a tree they had planted together decades before. The headstone was simple: Hannah Douglas Lawson, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. 1861–1950, and next to it Jesse Lawson, beloved husband, father, grandfather, and friend. 1857–1942. Between the two stones, carved into a shared base, were the words, "Together through the storm, together in eternity." The Triple Creek Ranch continued for generations after Jesse and Hannah were gone. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on the work they had started, building on the foundation they had laid. The story of how the ranch began, with a cowboy finding a dying woman in a blizzard and promising to be her hope, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The small house Jesse had built, the first home he and Hannah had shared, was preserved as a sort of shrine, kept just as it had been when they lived there. Couples who were struggling would sometimes go there to sit and talk, finding inspiration in the story of Jesse and Hannah, finding hope that if they could weather such storms, perhaps others could too. The land itself seemed to remember them. The meadow where Jesse had proposed was always full of wildflowers, even in dry years. The tree under which they were buried grew tall and strong, its branches offering shade and shelter. And on cold winter nights when the wind howled and the snow fell, people swore they could sometimes see two figures on the porch of the old house, sitting together, holding hands, watching the storm pass, because love like that does not die. Love like that is eternal. It lives on in the children and grandchildren, in the land that was worked with loving hands, in the stories that are told around dinner tables and campfires. It lives on in every choice to hope instead of despair, to love instead of fear, to keep going when it would be easier to give up. Hannah had been lost in a blizzard, ready to die, convinced that hope was gone forever. Jesse had found her and promised to be her hope, and he had kept that promise every single day of his life. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a love story that transcended the hardships of their time and place, a testament to the power of human connection and the resilience of the human spirit. Their story was one of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, not through grand gestures or heroic deeds, though there had been both, but through the simple, daily choice to love and support each other. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of finding home in another person, of hope rising from the ashes of despair. It was, quite simply, a story of love, the kind of love that saves, the kind of love that endures, the kind of love that makes life worth living, even when the storms rage and the future seems uncertain. And that love, that hope, that home, lived on long after Jesse and Hannah were gone. It lived in the ranch they had built, in the family they had raised, in the lives they had touched. It lived in every grandchild who heard their story and believed that true love was possible, in every couple who struggled through hard times and held on because Jesse and Hannah had shown them it could be done. The blizzard had tried to take everything from Hannah, but instead it had led her to Jesse. And Jesse had given her back not just her life, but a life worth living. A life filled with love and laughter, with family and purpose, with hope that never died. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for, to love and be loved. To face the storms and survive them. To build something lasting that would outlive the builders. Jesse and Hannah had done all of that and more. Their story was their legacy, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when hope seems lost and death seems certain, salvation can come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes in the form of a cowboy who refuses to let a stranger die, who promises to be hope when hope is gone, who keeps that promise for the rest of his life. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is everything. The Triple Creek Ranch still stands today, more than a century after Jesse and Hannah first made it their home. The land is still worked, the cattle still graze, and the family they started continues to grow and thrive. Visitors sometimes come to see the place where this remarkable love story unfolded, to stand in the meadow where Jesse proposed, to see the small house he built with his own hands, to visit the graves where they lie together, united in death as they were in life. And on those graves, fresh flowers appear every week, placed there by descendants who never knew Jesse and Hannah in life, but who carry their love forward into each new generation. The flowers are a reminder that some stories never end, that some loves never die, that hope once kindled can burn forever. The blizzard made Hannah lose all her hope. A cowboy found her and said, "I will be your hope from now on." And he was. For 57 years, through everything, he was her hope, and she was his. Together, they proved that love could conquer anything, that hope could survive any storm, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things we will ever know. Their story is not unique in its themes. Many people have loved and lost, struggled and survived, found hope in unexpected places. But Jesse and Hannah's story is special because of how completely they gave themselves to it, how fully they lived it, how their love transformed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. That is the power of hope. That is the power of love. And that is the legacy of Jesse and Hannah Lawson, two people who found each other in a storm and built a love that weathered every storm that followed. Their story is a beacon for anyone who has ever felt lost, for anyone who has ever despaired, for anyone who has ever wondered if love is real. It is real. Jesse and Hannah proved it, and their story, passed down through generations, continues to prove it today. Because some loves are too strong to be contained by a single lifetime. Some loves echo through eternity, inspiring and uplifting, reminding us all that no matter how dark the storm, dawn will come. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, dawn comes in the form of another person, someone who sees us, truly sees us and chooses to stay. That was what Jesse did for Hannah. And that was what Hannah did for Jesse. They saved each other. They chose each other. And they built a life together that still resonates, still inspires, still gives hope to anyone who hears their story. The blizzard that nearly killed Hannah instead gave her the greatest gift she would ever receive. It gave her Jesse. It gave her love. It gave her hope. And in the end, that made all the difference.